Welcome to video clip 5.4, in which we investigate data objects and subprocesses. So the idea is that data object can also be defined as collections, and these can be processed by multiple instances activities. So initially in this week we discussed that we can have data objects that are where I do not have just one data object, but I have a list of data objects of the same kind. And it turns out that it's useful to use multiple instances activities to be able to process each of these data objects individually at a time. So the idea is data objects defined as collections can be processed by multiple instances activities or MI activities. We first look at the input of multiple or of list data objects. So we first look at this part. So we have the pack order. Multiple instances activity, and this pack order takes a list of order items in state accepted. So each data object of a collection is then processed by one activity instance, by one instance of this multiple instances activity. Here, that both is possible, that can be parallel or sequential, as we have learned already when we discussed the multiple instances activities. All right. Regarding the output, so we now look at the output side of the same activity. Each activity instance creates a data object for an output collection. So this pack order, each pack order multiple instance activity can create an order item in state packed. Here's the example. The state of each order item is changed from accepted to packed by the pack order multiple instances activity. Turning to data object collections or lists of data objects of the same kind, these can also be input or output to activities. And here we can also use multiple instances activities, but we can also use single instances or normal activities. Here we have the example that, the send order activity reads the order item data collection in state packed. Send order activity reads the order item in state packed and changes the state of each order item to send. So that looks similar to the pack order already, but there's an important difference, and that is there's just one send order activity. So the send order activity takes the whole collection and changes the state of each of the data items in this collection, or the order items in that collection, from package to send, and then terminates. So that's another way of processing the data object collections in one step. I don't need to use here these many process instances or the multiple instances activities, but I can just use one single instance activity that reads a collection and writes a collection. We can also use activities for consolidation of data objects. So activities can take a data object collection as input and produce just one output data object. That is allowed, and we call this consolidation. So an activity can read a data object collection and create just one output data object. An example we have here, so that's a simple process with just one activity called consolidate order. The consolidate order activity reads a list of order items, each of which is in the state accepted, and creates one object, one order object in the state consolidated. So all the order items are put together, read in one step, and then the new order data object is created in state consolidated. We have seen that subprocesses are very useful for organizing large process models. So by this functional decomposition, we can model complex process models, not just on one page, but we can organize this in a hierarchical manner, thereby manage the complexity. And we can also use, of course, data in the different levels that we have in this hierarchy of process models. And we like to discuss how that works. So the transfer of data objects between a subprocess activity and its child a process or its children processes. The approach we have here, or the approach that BPMN provides, is that there is a manual assignment of a data object on the process level to a data object on the sub-process level. So we use references to say, well, a data object for a sub-process is then, let's say, mapped to a data object on the process level. We see how that works on the next slide with an example. However, there is no, let's say, help, no constraints by BPMN to regarding consistency, so I can easily assign an order data object to an invoice data object. We then would need certain rules for modeling to avoid these types of issues. We have to be very careful in doing that. So in any case, the modeler has the responsibility of preserving the consistency regarding data objects on different levels. Also, data input and data output that we've seen on the process level so far, they can also be used and applied to sub-process. We see all this in the following example. We have a collapsed sub-process called handle order. And this collapsed sub-process takes or reads a data object order in state accepted and writes the data object order in state sent. Now, if we zoom into this sub-process, we see a process consisting of two activities: to pack the order and to send the order. And the pack order activity has one input or data input, that is the order document in state accepted. And by reference, it is clear that the data object order of the top level or of the higher level process is then used as input also to the sub-process. And we use the data input signal here not to show that it is the input to the overall process, but as the input to the sub-process that is available before the sub-process has started. So while the process on the higher level was executing already. The same holds for the order in state sent that is available after send order is executed. And here we have the output, data output marker attached to indicate that the order in state sent is available even after the process terminates. Here in this case, even after the sub-process terminates. And therefore, we have also the reference from this data object order in state sent to the higher level process. This brings us to an end of video clip 5.4, in which we discussed data objects and sub-processes. We looked at data object collections and discussed how they can be processed by activities. In particular, we addressed multiple instances activities in which each activity instance can work on one specific data object. So process each element of the collection in one activity instance, but we can also use single instances activities to process a data collection as a whole. And finally, we discussed briefly how data can be transferred to sub-processes and back from sub-processes to the environment of the sub-process in the higher level process.